Thank you again for joining us today. I just like to introduce myself before we get started. Welcome to the National Academy of Inventors ScholarShare webinar series. My name is Jade Stewart, and I currently serve as the director of the National Academy of Inventors. For those who may not be familiar, the NAI is a member organization comprising U.S. and international universities, government agencies, and nonprofit research institutes with over 4,000 individual inventor members, fellows, and senior members spanning more than 250 institutions worldwide. The NAI was founded in 2010 to recognize and encourage inventors with patents issued from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, enhance the visibility of academic technology and innovation, encourage the disclosure of intellectual property, educate and mentor innovative students, and translate the inventions of its members to benefit society. We offer a variety of programs for our members and partners, including but not limited to our mentorship platform, Global Academic Inventors Network, commonly referred to as GAIN, which connects students, researchers, and faculty from across the world. Technology and Innovation, which is our multidisciplinary journal published in-house each quarter of the year. And then also most recently, we launched From Campus to Commerce, a video series featuring early stage innovation that takes place at our member institutions, such as the inventors of plant-based protein alternative Beyond Meat from the University of Missouri. We also offer 2 recognition and award programs, fellows and senior members, and we are still accepting nominations. Our fellows nominations close next week, Friday, so I encourage you all to submit an application or nominate your peers for these awards. Our organization is committed to using its platform to help minimize barriers and promote an inclusive environment for all, especially through these programs I mentioned and beyond. Though we were not able to have our annual meeting this year, we are excited to present our virtual ScholarShare series. And today's webinar is titled Fostering Inclusive and Equitable Entrepreneurial Ecosystems Across APLU's Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities. I would like to introduce our moderator, Shailin Jyotishi. Shailin is the Assistant Director of Economic Development and Community Engagement at the APLU. He oversees APLU's Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities program and serves as a core APLU, excuse me, lost my script. Strange, apologies. My computer just decided to go crazy. Okay, excuse me. He serves as the core APLU researcher, strategist, and community builder focused on talent and workforce development, innovation ecosystems, and civic engagement at universities. He is recognized as a World Economic Forum global shaper and fulfills the mission through a variety of leadership positions, such as being a Foretell Ambassador Board Member at Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology, a University Innovation Fellow at Stanford University, and a member of the International Economic Development Council's Higher Education Advisory Committee, among many other roles. So please join me in welcoming Shailin. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Jade, for the very kind introduction, and thank you all so much for joining this web panel. We're sorry we can't meet with you in person, but there's some benefits to meeting online in this way, so looking forward to having a great conversation with you. As Jade mentioned, my name is Shailin Jyotishi, and I'm from APLU, and I'll be the moderator of this panel discussion today. I'm going to first walk through a little bit of an overview of the APLU Innovation and Economic Prosperity University's designation, which will set some context for our conversation today with our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to share my screen, bear with me. And I'm hoping that you all can see my screen. Could somebody confirm in the chat? No? Maybe we have some issue.
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Jade. So As I mentioned, my name is Shaylin Jyotishi. I'm really pleased to be joining you all from APLU, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. And I'd like to just give you a little bit of an overview of our Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities program as we get started here. A little bit on APLU, if you're not familiar, we're North America's oldest presidents-led higher ed association. We represent public research universities. We have 240 wonderful members in all 50 states and U.S. territories and in Canada and Mexico as well. And we're based in Washington, D.C. We support our member institutions through research and projects like IEP, as well as policy and advocacy efforts. And we work across the university enterprise from the research domain to the provost domain to government affairs and communications to achieve this goal. The Innovation and Economic Prosperity designation was established in 2013, and I see one of our founders in the chat box here, Jim Waddell. And the program was established to help higher education institutions strengthen their comprehensive economic development strategy, inclusive of innovation and entrepreneurship, but also focusing on workforce development and talent pathways, as well as the stewardship of place through social, cultural, and community development through cooperative extension, community engagement, public service and outreach, and the myriad of other ways in which institutions contribute to their local communities. 66 institutions all across the continent have earned the IEP designation. You can see a sampling of them here on screen. And the IEP designation process really helps institutions maximize their economic and societal impact. Certainly, it's a great recognition for institutions that have demonstrated a significant commitment to economic development and are really going the extra mile in fulfilling that commitment. But first and foremost, the IEP designation process helps institutions better know, measure, and tell their economic development impact to their on-campus stakeholders, students, faculty, colleagues, as well as off-campus stakeholders, the legislature, industry, community members, and so forth. So you'll see on screen a couple of resources that IEP institutions use to really elevate and maximize their impact. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see some publications and resources that APLU has generated with its partners. This talent, innovation, and place trifecta you see on screen is really central to the IEP University's program and really helps bring things like invention and entrepreneurship a part of a bigger whole, a comprehensive view of economic development at higher education institutions. On the right-hand side, you'll actually see us hosted by one of our panelists, Tanya Witherspoon. This was actually the last trip we all took before the pandemic broke out. The IEP University's program is unique in that institutions pursue this designation as a collaborative, as a community of practice, all sharing and learning from one another, working through shared challenges and overcoming various kinds of barriers that might come about as institutions think through how to maximize their economic and societal impact. The designation process has resulted in a great deal of outcomes, we're pleased to say. I was debating which ones I should highlight briefly here, and I thought these two would be really salient. Of course, two wonderful leaders within the National Academy of Inventors. So on the left-hand side, we have Dr. Paul Sandberg testifying on behalf of his leadership of the IEP process at University of South Florida, and of course in his capacity as president of the National Academy of Inventors. On the right-hand side, we have a testimony from our newly confirmed director of the National Science Foundation, Setruthman Pancharantan, Panch for short, who's the former executive vice president at Arizona State, where he co-led the process for ASU, and of course NAI's vice president for strategic initiatives and membership. But we're also really pleased that the IEP University's program has gotten some external validation From Forbes, we had a terrific spotlight in Forbes magazine in May that actually spotlighted what IEP institutions are doing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, so quite salient for the times we live in. We've also had research funded by the National Science Foundation and NIST around IEP institutions, which has been a really terrific opportunity for us to explore more deeply as to what makes these institutions tick and how we can advance them further. So I'm going to give a little bit of plug, which might be expected. APLU is currently seeking institutions to participate in its fall 2020 cohort of startups, as we refer to them, which are institutions that are pursuing the designation. We have 30 institutions currently in this community, including one of our panelists today. So if you're interested, we invite you to visit aplu.org/seek-IEP. And I just wanted to note that this program is available to all higher education institutions, whether or not you're an APLU member or a non-member. We have a terrific partnership with the University Economic Development Association to facilitate engagement for non-APLU member institutions. So I hope this sets the stage a bit for our conversation today. I'll quickly introduce our panelists, but before I do that, let me just give a final comment as to why we thought the IEP framing would be useful for this conversation we're having today around how we can foster more inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. I should note that we actually came up with this panel idea in early March, in early January, I should say, for the March meeting of NAI that was supposed to take place in Phoenix. And I think in light of the George Floyd killing earlier this summer and the events we've seen across the country and really around the world around inclusive and equitable opportunities for all, this is a really timely conversation. In IEP, we always emphasize that innovation is part of a broader a perspective that institutions bring to the communities they serve. Innovation, talent, and place put together really empower an institution to leverage its research and teaching missions to maximize its public value on society and regional economies. So I just wanted to make that dot connection between our IEP colleagues and the topic we have at hand. Without further ado, you see on screen our wonderful panelists, and I'd like to invite our panel to now turn on their videos, and I'll turn off our PowerPoint slide in just a moment here, but I'd like to introduce you all to our stellar lineup. We're joined by, first on the left-hand side, you'll see Tanya Witherspoon. Tanya is the Associate Vice President for Industry Engagement and Applied Learning at Wichita State University in Kansas. Tanya is co-leading the IEP process at WSU, so we really have the opportunity to hear from an institution that's in the midst of this process as they go on to maximize their economic development strategy. Next to Tanya, you see on screen, we have Anthony Hood. Anthony is the Director of Civic Innovation in the Office of the President at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, where he leads a number of initiatives to spur inclusive and entrepreneurial ecosystems. Really pleased to have Anthony with us. Next to Anthony, on the top right, we have our wonderful colleague, Julia Potter. Julia is Director of Education Partnerships and Special Projects at California State University, Northridge. Julia is also President of the University Economic Development Association, so we're really pleased to have Julia's perspective. And then we really wanted to round out our panel with a non-university perspective, and we could pick no one better than our colleague, Rachel Jagoda Burnett, who's a program officer at the Lemelson Foundation. Rachel has been a longtime partner of APLU's and of the IEP University's program as we work through building inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial systems. So welcome to all of our panelists, and thanks again very much for joining. I'm now going to turn off my screen share so we can see everyone's wonderful faces. And that should do it. And we'll go ahead and dive right in. We're going to start by having a conversation with our panelists, and then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. I certainly invite everyone to submit your Q&A questions as they arise. using the Zoom function you see on screen. All you have to do is scroll down to your bottom toolbar and there's a button that says Q&A. So you don't need to hold on to your questions until the very end. You can insert them and we'll answer the questions in order that they're received. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. And to kick off our conversation, I'm going to start with you, Julia. Cal State Northridge, a 2018 IEP designee, is located in LA, a city that has a number of traditional and non-traditional assets to spur innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems. But CSUN serves the highest number of Pell Grant recipients in the state of California. 75% of the student population is non-white, and 40% of them are first-generation students. So those are student segments that may not traditionally find themselves in the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. Could you speak to how CSUN has been working to foster these linkages between LA's assets and CSUN students and instill the spirit of entrepreneurship across your student populations? What has worked and what tips could you offer our attendees today who are looking to do the same in their regions?
Shaylin, thank you so much, and what a pleasure to be here and to have this conversation. So the answer to your question, the big answer is with a lot of intentionality. And I also want to say that the fact that CSUN is an IEP designated university has really helped us to foster those linkages and make those robust connections with our LA region. So I'm going to share a little bit of that story with you and give you some examples of what we've done. And then I really look forward to a pretty robust Q&A period. So I want to say that CSUN is a regional comprehensive university. And as a comprehensive, I really will say that our core competencies around fostering innovation and entrepreneurship have really been embedded in our applied teaching and our applied learning approach since the university was founded in 1958. And it is true, LA has absolutely made it clear that we are driving an innovation economy, that everything else supports an innovation economy. So as a university in this region, it was imperative that we were aligned and ready to go with programs and activities that supported where our students were going to graduate and work and live and raise their families. So I want to say that we really turned to that intentional approach really when President Diane Harrison came to the campus, and that was in 2012. I always say that for us, it's leadership, leadership, leadership. And in 2012, we made some investments and some hires and some decisions to foster those linkages. We entered into a partnership agreement with the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. We received a transformative gift from an alumni who really wanted to invest and catalyze entrepreneurial activity. That gift fostered an entrepreneurial programmatic shift in our College of Business, but it came with the imperative that this was for the university collectively. We also changed our mission, vision, value statement. We included in our value statement that we were providing an environment conducive to the encouragement of innovation, experimentation, and creativity. And we were encouraging everybody to take the risks that were associated to really drive that agenda. In 2017, we went after an I-Corps designation. And that was very catalyzing for what we needed to do to be relevant and aligned and then ultimately a leader in this innovation economy. We became an IEP designation in 2018, and that really provided us the moment of, we really have a lot here at CSUN, but not everybody knows what we have. And it was time for us to aggregate what we had so that we didn't have to duplicate. We didn't have to make investments that were really not needed. We really just needed to make sure that there were programs and activities to leverage what we had and that were intentionally inclusive across the university, not siloed in the College of Education, not siloed in the College of Business. I also want to say that this activity led us to receiving the Carnegie Designation in 2020. So what did we do? Well, we developed co-curricular activities and programs that cut across all the colleges. They may be housed in a college, but the initiative was always about everybody. Not that everybody was welcome, is that everybody needed to be there. We created bull ring and fast pitch. Bull ring we are the matadors at CSUN. So Shark Tank, imagine we're now the bull ring. So that was really a fun imperative, and it really drove the message about teams, and that the value proposition was really looking beyond just your own friends, your own program, to look across at arts and communication and sciences and health and human development, that was the imperative. Other pots developed across the campus, Data Jam, Summer Accelerator. We established CSUN Innovation Incubator, but all of this again around a university-wide message. And we have now some data that shows that by doing so, we really were seeing students across the campus engaging in these teams. Every one of our 9 colleges had student representations in all of these mixed programs. Students were from all ethnicities in our campus profile. We had slightly more women than men, and it showed that there was activity and engagement from freshmen to graduate students, with the most activity at the senior and graduate level. We established Build Poder, which was a program funded by NSF to drive research in the biomedical fields, and that was based on critical race theory. So it was important that we really were understanding who we were and how we were going to get things done. There are other really interesting initiatives that are on our plate, particularly about leveraging our library as the innovation hub and catalyzer. But I think in the interest of time, Shaylin, shall I stop there? And then I say, please ask me questions, because I have all kinds of stories to tell you. But my main tip is know what you've got. Leverage what you have. Don't worry so much about creating something new, because you probably have a lot of great work going on now. And that is what the IEP did for us.
No, that's terrific, Julia. I really love the emphasis you had there on the learning connection to the entrepreneurial enterprise there at CSUN. So that's brilliant. So from LA, let's fly to Birmingham, Alabama. And Anthony, my next question is for you. Also a 2018 IEP designee, I might add. UAB is located in a medium-sized city in the South. And talk about diversity. 83% of UAB students are female, and nearly 40% are racial minorities. So building on my question for Julia, what have you all done there in Birmingham, and what could you share with our audience by way of strategies to foster inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems in an area that may not necessarily have the assets of an LA, but certainly has its own set of assets, per Julia's comment of knowing what you got? Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Shaylin. Thank you for the invitation to participate on this panel with my distinguished colleagues. You're right. Birmingham is a unique city. In addition to those stats, the majority of our students are, a large percentage of them are first-generation students. They are actually, a lot of our students are from the state of Alabama, so we're really creating economic opportunity for our state. UAB is actually the largest employer in the state. We have a $7 billion impact on our state's economy. And UAB came to prominence really just a few short years ago. We're an infant as it relates to universities. Much like Julia mentioned, we're only 51 years old. We got started back in 1969, and we came to prominence when U.S. Steel went into its decline. This city was founded in 1871, basically because we had all the ingredients to make steel. We had coal and iron ore and things like that. So we're in a city that's 74% African American. by population, we have the fourth largest African-American population in the nation. So I think we have some unique conditions, but we have some unique opportunities. On campus, we have pretty much the same kind of things that you guys have at your institutions. We have an Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We've newly created a major in entrepreneurship that we're rolling out actually this fall. We have an innovation lab. We found excess space over in our library and turned that into a makerspace. We have a co-ed entrepreneurship club. We have a student startup boot camp. We also have an I-Corps program funded by the NSF. So in many ways, those things look much like a lot of our other institutions. But I think the opportunity for us is in light of these three crises that we are facing right now. One being a global pandemic that is still raging out of control and is really hitting the state of Alabama hard, and people of color particularly hard, particularly Black people, because of the disparities that were existing prior to COVID. And then that's led to an economic crisis because, I think the World Economic Forum confirmed last month that we are actually in a global depression that is forecasted to be twice as bad as the one in 2009 and probably worse than since we've had the worst depression that we've had since World War II. So I feel like there's a tsunami that's headed towards us. And then also, Shaylin, like you mentioned, in light of, the racial unrest that we've had in the wake of the murders of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery. So I think this presents an opportunity for us to really rethink, reframe, and redeploy all those assets that I mentioned that we have here on campus to really make an impact on our local community. So some of the things that we engaged in prior to COVID, we engaged in a partnership about 18 months ago with the Brookings Institution to help us really rethink how we're doing economic development, talent attraction, and workforce development. We also commissioned a study from Burning Glass Technologies to help us look at our workforce. And what we found, not unlike a lot of urban areas, is that a lot of our jobs are in non-tradable sectors, which means that we're not selling enough of our products outside of our community to bring in new dollars to the community. And then also our workforce is at risk of disruption because of technology and automation. That is going to have a huge impact on our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it requires us to take evasive action because when we look at it, our region is really falling behind some of our sister regions across the Southeast. When we look at an Atlanta or a Nashville or a Charlotte or even a New Orleans. So I feel like the decisions that we make over the next 18 months in Birmingham is going to really determine the next 20 years. I think you couple that with 2040, which 2040 is widely believed to be the year that we turn into a majority-minority country. So I think we have an opportunity where at the university we can plant our flag around equity and inclusion, being a place where all people can come and thrive, be educated, but then also start companies. And so take advantage of entrepreneurship programming that we're developing, our incubator that's off campus, and then taking advantage of this largely African-American population that we have here that, quite frankly, has been struggling getting access to capital, getting access to resources, getting access to the supply chains of the corporations that we have here. And so that's what we've been focused on, at least in my office, is building partnerships and pathways to those largely traditional organizations that we have in our community that were already doing economic development, making sure that they have access into the campus community, and then encouraging our faculty, staff, and students to engage with them through our research, teaching, and our service. So in light of these three crises, I think going forward, some of the strategies that we need to look at is looking at our faculty. Do our faculty actually reflect the demographics of our actual community? Because if they do, then if we have more minority faculty, those minority faculty are going to attract more students of color to come into our innovation entrepreneurial ecosystem and to take our programming. We can also help with the cultural competency of our non-minority faculty, staff, and students. We need to look at our curriculum to see, do we actually have people of color that are actually in the curriculum that are the protagonists in the case studies that we do? Do we take our students, when we can actually go back into the community, do we take our students out to actually engage with entrepreneurs of color? Do we invite entrepreneurs of color into the classroom to be our guest speakers so that our students can see that we exist, that we do have people of color that are doing amazing and wonderful things in our community? So I think those are the things that we're doing in my office that we want to scale up throughout our community, but also maybe lift that up as an example for other urban areas that have largely minority communities or that have growing minority communities to make sure that all people can thrive in this new ecosystem that we're going into, because none of us knows what the next 18 months is going to look like. I know we're optimistic that we're going to have a vaccine and then we'll go back to normal, but we have to recognize that this is a new normal. And so because of that new normal, what is that going to look like? And then recognizing that those disparities that were here before with the access to capital, the venture capital that's not flowing to women and people of color, how do we be very intentional about addressing those things? And so our universities being those anchor institutions of our community, we have an opportunity, but dare I say a responsibility to make sure we're proactive about that.
Well, that's brilliant, Anthony. I love the comment about faculty representation. It just goes to show that strategies to foster inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems isn't necessarily something that the tech transfer shop does here or the incubator does there. It's really this ecosystems level approach for systematic change and systems level change. No, that's brilliant. And I was also really excited to hear the Brookings work that you did. That sounded like talent, innovation, and place, actually, in many ways. So that was quite good. I'd invite our panelists to please drop any links you think might be useful for our attendees into the chat. This is one of the benefits we have of being virtual, is we can do that quite easily. So I did drop the spotlight of the Forbes feature of IEP designees. So Anthony, Julia, Tanya, Rachel, as you all continue speaking, please feel free to drop information into the chat for our attendees. My next question, now we're flying from Birmingham, Alabama to Wichita, Kansas, and my next question is for you, Tanya. So Wichita State University serves many students from rural communities across Kansas that may not traditionally have exposure or access to the innovation assets that we might find in LA and even in Birmingham. So for the benefit of university leaders who are also working with rural communities, rural students, and in the heartland, could you share strategies that WSU has used or is working to implement to promote more entrepreneurial opportunities for folks who come from the rural parts of Kansas and beyond?
Absolutely, and thank you again. I'm thrilled to be with this panel that I've had the pleasure of getting to learn from through the APLU IEP process. This is exciting. So Wichita State University is in Wichita, Kansas, right in the middle of the heartland of the United States. But I think if you have only flown over us, which many of you have, and never stopped, you might not actually realize the diverse city and population that we have here in Wichita. So Wichita is the largest city in Kansas, and we're the 52nd largest city in the nation. So we think of ourselves, so I would just say rural is, it's of your perspective, right? We think in Wichita, we are in the big city. And we are a very short drive away from every one of our sister communities that come and have lunch and breakfast and do business with us every day as the entire state. Does that make sense? So we think of ourselves as a state, and Wichita State is a state university for the state of Kansas. So it's, interesting to come up with this rural idea, because definitely we're in the heartland, but we think of it differently. And our Wichita Public School District, which is in Wichita, obviously, we have 50,000 students. There are over 105 languages spoken in those students' homes. They represent 97 countries of birth. And we are a major minority school district here in Wichita. Our largest ethnicity is Hispanic. So we are a very, very diverse city right here in the heartland. Another thing that we really pick up, and Wichita State drives this, is technical and applied learning. So in our Wichita public schools, that's our K-12 school right here in Wichita, we have over 90 learning centers that provide technical and applied learning during the K-12 environment, and then Wichita State just picks that up. One of the things that we have done recently is actually bring in one of our local technical colleges, and they are now WSU Tech. So we have a seamless move from K-12 to community college or technical school to a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. So we call that, cradle to grave, ongoing lifelong learning, and we really live that at Wichita State. So technical education, it's like Anthony said, really be who you are. Wichita State is a very technical school, and our community is technical. We are we are very known for entrepreneurship, even though you all might not know some of the companies that have started right here in Wichita. We certainly have a lot of aircraft companies, Learjet, Bombardier, Cessna, Beechcraft, Spirit, all of those companies started in Wichita, as well as Pizza Hut started, White Castle, several other of your favorite, restaurants, Rent-A-Center, Residence Inn by Marriott, and maybe one of the bigger family-owned companies you've heard of is Koch Industries. So we have a very rich, a rich base to pull from, and we use that to spread across. One of the things that Kansas is known for is small family-owned businesses. Okay? Every one of our communities, all of the businesses are owned by the people that live in that community, right? They run the grocery store and the doctor's office and the pharmacy and, the school, the public services, all of that. The whole community depends on those people that are in the community. So to that effect, Wichita State's Center for Entrepreneurship, we have had for many, many years, a great infusion of all of those companies that have come out of Kansas. Their financial and resource support. We have a very rich Kansas Family Business Forum that we take across the state. We move it everywhere. We have a growing rural business program that, again, really focuses on how to grow programs. We're pretty good at scaling, as you can imagine. Pizza Hut and Rent-A-Center, and those things that we have started as small family businesses that have scaled, very, very, very large. So those are things that we're good at. Franchising and scaling, precision and technology are things that we use at Wichita State to drive the economic environment around us. We also have a very, very rich youth entrepreneurship program. Literally, Koch Industries started youth entrepreneurship 25 years ago, and it's now in over 200 schools in 19 states. And we start young with everything. We are totally connected to our K-12 and our community college and technical schools. We use that as an entrance into university. We really, really grow our own. And I think that, starts probably a lot with our farm businesses that are all over, our state. To that end, we also have, we drive our Economic Outlook Forum. So Wichita State actually has a center that does the Economic Outlook data mining and distribution of the economic outlook for all of our cities and our state. We have a huge conference every year, of course, where we put that data out, but we also drive it across the state, and we have a road show to all of our smaller communities, and we show them how the local economic outlook looks for them, what the state, the region, the nation, and the globe is. And when you get to the globe, we have a very, very rich export business. Kansas exports huge amounts of our business outside, and we have a Kansas World Global Trade Center that works with all of our companies to connect them to export partners, how to grow their business. That's a lot of why I think our businesses, can grow. To that point, we have, similar to what Anthony talked about, we have you know, Startup Grind and I-Core and a maker space and, you know, all of the things that, you know, are necessary, you know, for a university. I think another thing that we do though is we hire a fair amount of our business leaders to teach classes, to lead seminars, and to help us build certificates. So a lot of how we keep the curriculum relevant is we'll start out with a certificate. So, you know, a group of say 3 to 4 classes that we recognize at, you know, Wichita State, but we use our industry to support that. Then we stand those up as certification programs with our industry. You know, and then we drive them down into K-12 and throughout our program. So a good example of that is Dassault Systems is a company we're very connected with. They make CAD and CATIA software. CAD and CATIA software is the basis for a lot of our engineering jobs in aircraft and all of our manufacturing companies. So our relationship with them is that we started a certificate program where we were teaching all of our engineers CAD and CATIA on the side, and it's blown into, we actually create the curriculum that Dassault Systems uses worldwide for their training, and in turn, they supply educational licenses for all of our schools, all of our community colleges, and all of our K-12 schools in the region. And, you know, those kinds of relationships, that kind of connection, I think is what drives a lot of, you know, what we do. I'll end with one final thing that I think has been really, really valuable is we have recognized that we are on the I-35 corridor that takes us all the way from Minneapolis to down to San Antonio. It's a very, very, you know, big piece of the economy of the heartland. And so we have worked with the cities up and down the I-35 corridor to provide in-state tuition to all of their residents. So we now have a large number of people, a large number of first generation students that are coming to Wichita State, coming to Kansas, and, you know, learning, and that has changed a lot of our opportunity by getting all of that, you know, new information and new people in. So I'll stop there. That's more than you wanted to hear.
Terrific, Tanya. So now we'll move on to our final panelist, Rachel from the Lemelson Foundation. And apologies, Rachel, we're running a little bit short on time. So if you could maybe help us get to answering some of these questions briefly, that'd be terrific so we can get to some questions. So Rachel, you've worked with many institutions around invention and entrepreneurship. You've worked with NAI. From your perspective as a foundation, as a funder, what advice or tips do you have for university-based innovation ecosystem builders like the folks on the panel here and in the audience to bring and fund more, to fund initiatives that bring underrepresented groups into the innovation enterprise at some of these institutions and in their cities? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and I will keep it short so that we can get to the Q&A. So as Shaylin said, I'm Rachel Jagoda-Brunette. I'm a program officer with the Lemelson Foundation, which is a private family foundation based in Portland, Oregon. We are currently safe. People have been asking me that. We work on many programs related to improving lives through invention. My specific work is around the idea of catalyzing regional ecosystems of all of the resources that come together to enable both the people who become the inventors and the products that can turn into businesses and make both economic and social and environmental benefits in the community. So honing in on the question and the topic at hand in terms of how those of us who work in this ecosystem space, particularly in higher education, can think about making a difference in terms of creating equitable access to the benefits of innovation and entrepreneurship. I think that the first thing that I always think about is setting goals for what innovation can actually accomplish. I think in many regions, you see people thinking about it in terms terms of economic productivity, how many companies, how many patents, how many follow-on funding dollars are coming in. And there needs to be an equal emphasis on equitable access to the economic mobility that high growth entrepreneurship and innovation can bring. I think if you are constantly focused on balancing those two goals, that is a start to the process of actually creating an equitable approach to innovation ecosystems. In terms of how this actually looks in universities, we've been working on a project recently to help characterize and define what an ecosystem that supports innovation and invention looks like. We found that in a lot of places, people were trying to identify ecosystems by the players within them and saying, okay, you know, we have this ecosystem, we have the angel investor, we have the university, we have the accelerator, and we have the entrepreneurs, and that's our ecosystem. We think about it differently. We think about ecosystems in terms of the roles that are played in order to, again, support the people and the companies and the products. And we found that if you look at it by these roles or capacities that are needed to support the entire pathway, so not just saying, you know, once you're ready to have an idea or an entrepreneur, you can come to us and we'll support you, but really thinking about everything that goes into getting people to that point, whether that's K-12 education, whether that's social safety net programs that make sure that they have a ride to school and food on their table and a, you know, a safe place to sleep at night so they can actually learn and see themselves as agents of change. You know, we see all of that going into creating these ecosystems. And then once you understand the roles that are out there and think about which roles it is that your institution plays, then you can move on to understanding who the other players are. So we've, you know, some of the roles that we've learned about that I think are particularly relevant to institutions of higher education, none of these should be surprising. You know, educating people, obviously, mentoring people, conducting research and development, providing facilities for people who are trying to work on products and innovations and companies, acting as an educator of the talent and workforce pipeline as well. But the important part as you're thinking about, you know, how to support this broader ecosystem is understanding who everyone in the system who will be impacted by your work is. And so I think as a start, if you're seeing yourself as an ecosystem catalyst, and I'll point out, I don't use the term ecosystem builder. I don't think ecosystems are built. I think they're grown. And I think that, you know, unfortunately, in some instances, we see ecosystem builder sort of migrating into gatekeeper, and that's not helpful for anyone, particularly for marginalized populations. So if you're looking to be an ecosystem catalyst, I think the first thing is figure out what roles you play in the ecosystem, and then look at how you interact and depend on other players and other roles. And then those are your stakeholders. So if you find that you're doing, for example, education and mentoring, there's still people out there who need to provide capital to businesses to educate younger children in K-12, to make sure that there are services being provided to marginalized populations, whether that's you know, potential prospective Black or Latinx or LGBTQ or other entrepreneurs and innovators, and make sure that as you're doing your strategic decision making, those voices are in the room. And I think, and you know, repeating here things that the other panelists have said, but oftentimes I think, you know, not just in institutions of higher education, but with anyone who's working in this space, it's very easy to think about trade-offs in the way that they affect you. But you oftentimes don't necessarily recognize that maybe, you know, cutting a pre-college program because you don't see it as contributing to the innovation ecosystem is actually cutting off access for young students who will then never be able to see themselves as having the potential for becoming innovators, and actually harming the equitable access to economic mobility. So making sure as you're making decisions about what an ecosystem can do and what it can look like and what you're doing in it, that all of the voices are included, and then making sure that none of the trade-offs you're making are creating inadvertent harm to the system. I'm going through this kind of fast. I'm happy to share, you know, our work on what the roles are that universities can play in ecosystems. But I think the one that, I want to call out most importantly is kind of being a catalyzer and a convener in the community. Universities, institutions of higher education do so much, and they often are built in ways that they can be physically and kind of content-wise accessible to a broad swath of the community. And so I think really leaning into that role and saying we want to use this to create space for all of the people who have the potential to join in and benefit from an innovation economy. That's kind of the number one thing that people can do. And, I'm happy, I want to open up for questions, let everyone kind of answer questions, but I'm happy to share any of the work that we've done on this. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Shaylin.
Thanks so much, Rachel. That was a terrific innovation catalyst. I really like that. I have seen the innovation ecosystem builder language used. I always wonder if that's really the right term for our goals at hand. We do have a question from the audience, and this comes from Jim Waddell, and it's for any panelist who wishes to answer, which is, it really picks on sort of what you said, Rachel, actually. Could you speak to the extent of which ecosystems are designed versus organically emergent? And then the second part of the question is your thoughts on how these designed ecosystems, or catalyzed ecosystems, maybe we should say, are sort of juxtaposed against the organic ecosystems by way of challenges or opportunities for equity and inclusion specifically. So would anyone like to take a first stab?
Well, I think it's, I think it's very easy for us at universities to stay on our campuses. It's very easy to drive into campus, teach your classes, sit on your committees, and then go home. I think it's harder, but it's more necessary to actually leave campus, go out into the community, and actually engage with the people who are there. And particularly in a COVID environment, but even pre-COVID, that's hard work, but that's the work that needs to be done. And quite frankly, I don't think and I'm talking about academia in general, I don't know that we've had I don't think we've done a really good job of that, particularly when we're talking about, I hate these terms, marginalized, distressed, I like the term underestimated communities and communities that have suffered from underinvestment. But I think we're going to have to actually get out into those communities and make sure that the things we're doing on campus actually makes a difference in the community. And I don't know that that happens organically, that, it was mentioned before, we have to be very intentional and very proactive about that, particularly now when we have these crises that are facing us. Because there's a digital divide right now. I know we're moving to online education, but there was a digital divide before COVID, and that's just really been exacerbated. So there are a lot of concerns around those students that are not going to get access. With, us going out and engage with those seniors in high school, are there going to be some people that are going to be left behind? And so if we're not careful, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be left behind because of how we've traditionally done higher ed. So higher ed really is going to have to make some changes going forward, even more than what we've already done in the past 3 or 4 months.
Brilliant. That's terrific. Would anyone else like to add anything? Julie, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you very much. I actually really want to speak to the question and to Rachel's point. At Cal State Northridge, there is a lot of organic activity, to be sure. And as I said, we were very intentional, particularly when President Harrison came, about really catalyzing the innovation conversation at CSUN because of who our students are, their aspirations, their resilience to actually get themselves to a university. And it was critically important that they were well prepared to take their place in this innovation economy. Right now, supporting the innovation economy at CSUN is really about taking care of our students right now. The impact of COVID, the impact of the racial and equity, all of that has just a perfect storm of distress and rethink at our university. So our imperative is definitely to keep the programmatic alive and well. Students have reacted well. We've done surveys. They want to stay engaged. They want to come. We are going to have our freshman class. There was a moment of uncertainty about that, but the opportunity around an excellent public education is still alive and well at Cal State Northridge, but we really have taken a moment to really think about what we do around making sure people are connected, giving away hotspots, making sure that our food pantry is still in service, making sure that our career center is still providing that kind of membership, that all of our support services around taking care of our students are still there. And the good news is that they are, and the outcome is that our placemaking strategies are still alive and well. We haven't let anything go. Our innovation incubator is still working. Our Bill Poder is still bringing students into the proposition about research and moving on to the doctoral level. But it is really a moment, particularly for, I think, for all public institutions in particular, but universities across the country. This is a conversation we have at UVita as well, is that we really have to take care of our universities, but universities, as Anthony said, we really have to look at how we do it and why we do it, and what is the benefit to the region. This is our moment in many ways.
That's terrific, Julia. Thanks so very much for that. And I think your comments are a great sort of concluding thought for us, because we are at time at 3 p.m. Eastern. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jade for any final comments. But before I do that, if folks could just give us a virtual round of applause for a wonderful panelist today. Really great to learn from your perspectives and your advice. So Jade?
Thank you, Shaylin, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for a really robust discussion. Again, for those who may have additional questions or would like to reach out to the panel, we will provide their contact information, and you already received some of their resources and links in the chat. So I encourage you all to take a look at those links and engage in that for additional information. We will have a recording live and available by next week. So if you would like to rewatch this exciting program, it will be available on our YouTube channel, and you'll also receive a link to that as well. And you'll be able to actually watch additional webinars that we've hosted last month and this month. So I guess, again, want to thank you all for a really great conversation. This was, definitely not an ideal environment for us, but it's still worthwhile, and I'm glad we're able to connect virtually this way. So thank you again, Shaylin. Thank you to our panel, and again, have a great day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think we're going to take a photo.
I got a photo for us, so I'll share that with you guys.
Terrific. Thanks again, Jade. Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Stay well.
Bye.
Bye.